Hello there, and welcome to a new episode of the Impromptu Game Plan podcast. My name is Sarah Ferrison, and as always, I'm joined today by my co-presenter and co-author, Catherine Reynolds. Catherine and I have authored the upcoming book, The Impromptu Game Plan, the purposeful but also opportunistic careers of people like me. This book explores the careers and life stories of people who've made pivots in their lives to create more meaningful careers that align their strengths and experiences with their passions and values. After listening to and reflecting on those stories, we drew out some common themes, mindsets, and behaviors to create a framework, our storytelling wheel of reflection. While our book can only focus on a limited number of stories, we're taking the opportunity with these podcasts to talk to a wider range of people who are at different stages of their career journeys. Today, we're talking to Suzanne Snowden. I first met Suzanne about 10 or 11 years ago, and I believe Catherine may have known her even longer. Welcome, Suzanne. Thanks for joining today. You want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Catherine, Sarah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to catch up with you guys again after, it has to be at least 10 years and I think it's 13, Catherine, for you and I. I'm now director and founder of Message Consulting Limited. It's a UK small business startup, essentially, with one partner and an employee. And we help companies to land their messaging, essentially, in their thought leadership and their marketing. And I really am loving it.
Thanks for that, Suzanne. And Suzanne, just to start the dialogue today, I know that you have very kindly spent some time actually looking at our storytelling wheel of reflection, because I know that the pivot that you've made since you left the big faceless corporate world is much more complex than just establishing your own company, Messenger Consulting, and that you do so much more than that, to fill your life with satisfaction, to live your life with purpose, and to actually achieve joy. And so, just as a starting point, thinking about the storytelling wheel of reflection and your initial reactions to it, and what we say to everybody in the interviews for the book as well as in the podcasts is to start in the story wheel at the place where there's the most what we call gravitational pull. So in terms of at a high level, what were your thoughts when you first encountered the wheel, and then where was the natural gravitational pull for you as you thought about the pivots that you've made over the last few years in your contributing life in your career?
Yes, that's a great question because, Catherine, when I saw the wheel that you've developed, so much of it just hit me as, oh my God, I can't wait to get into this and really explore how this lens helps me to think about me. And all of us are different, of course. All of us have different experiences and different anxieties actually about the next stage of our lives, and we'll never get over those, I'm sure. But for me, I had to start with my strengths. It's not that I feel that I'm strong at anything in particular, but it was the landing place that I felt I had the most that I could really let out and articulate. And starting there allowed me to say, actually, I can do this. I can do some of these things. I'm good at this. I'm good at that. I need to work on this and work on that. And then from there, I pivoted over to experiences and thought, well, why do I feel that I can bring this kind of value to a client or to an organization? Well, that's based on some of the things that I've experienced in my life that are just wild and wonderful and seem like ages ago. I'm probably not the only one, but the way we did things back in, 25 years ago, I don't want to put an age on myself, but in marketing is so totally different than now. And I think to everyone now is growing up in a digital world where you automatically do a certain thing with your marketing. And I think sometimes some of that strategic background is missing from people's thoughts. So when I went through all the things I'd done in media consulting, and then in retail marketing, consumer goods events, running all of that for Coopers and Lybrand, and then more recent experience in multimedia marketing and the intelligent fridge. Do you remember we talked about that? Oh, now finally we're there. That was at EY. We're like, yeah, let's write a blog on the intelligent fridge. This was Google hadn't even been invented yet. Google wasn't invented yet. So, this is crazy kind of mind dump of my head. But I went from thinking about the strengths, thinking about experiences, and then through that, my passions just fell out of my hand. when I was typing, because I thought, okay, this is what I'm all about. And I found a sort of framework that I like to use myself to think about what I like to do, combined with what I'm good at, combined with the passion piece. So that was my entry point, really, and it was so useful. I haven't shared it yet, but I have written more than the space allowed on each of those three.
Excellent. I look forward to reading that if you choose to share that with us. Yeah, edit it. Well, do you know that's a really interesting point that you make about, sort of editing it, Suzanne, because I think what we have a tendency to do, when we're thinking about the things that we're good at, the things that we care about, and the things that we're doing and the things that we might do, is that we do, when we have a, sort of an emptying our heart and soul and brain onto the page, whatever form the page takes, whether it's, in the olden days, sort of something you'd write on paper and fax to yourself, or whether it's something that you do digitally, is that, sort of once we've put it down, our urgency as intelligent professionals is to edit it. And in editing it, I think sometimes we actually take out the things where we are potentially the most I'm resisting using the word passionate, because we were talking about passions, but the place where there's most heart, the place where there's most soul, the place where there's most vulnerability. So if we take those things out, it sort of feels and looks more legitimate in the professional world. And I think by that process of legitimization, then we can lose some of the things which are the unique drivers that can create the wonderful life that we haven't yet lived. We've lived a wonderful life. Most of us on this podcast have had some amazing opportunities and advantages which not everybody in the world has had, but that there are more to come. And I think the bigger our mindset around not editing out the heart and the soul, then the more capacity we have to do things which will bring even more joy.
Oh, I totally agree, Catherine. That what I'm hearing you say is that actually you lose that authenticity when you just perform on a stage in a corporate environment. It is like life is a stage. You assume this is what is expected of me. This is what other people around me are dressing like, they're acting like, they're performing. Everyone's performing, let's face it, every day. But I actually tried to eradicate some of the experiences that made me in the early days of my career. I didn't tell anyone I was from a small farming community. Didn't tell anyone that I was really into nature and animals, and I'd like gardening. I mean, can you imagine in the 90s saying, oh yeah, I love gardening. What are you going to do this week? I'm going to do some gardening. Gardening is the hottest thing since sliced bread now. But at the time, all of that authentic part of what actually made me excited, you actually covered up in a veneer of, really sharp black suit with a pencil skirt. That's what we did.
As you know, I've been teaching storytelling for a long time. And, one of the things I used to say to people is your story isn't your LinkedIn profile or your resume. Because, Catherine and I have seen this, when we go to interview someone to write their story for the book, we'll look at their LinkedIn profile. And, look, we all have these highly curated, edited LinkedIn profiles. But it's always fascinating to me when people actually start telling their story, the big gaps that the LinkedIn profile has, because people, I think for good reason, feel like, well, I couldn't possibly say that in my LinkedIn profile. That doesn't, the LinkedIn profile, the resume is a tool for getting a job. Whereas I think what we've been saying to people is, our book and thinking about your story and the framework that we have is not about getting your next job. It's about thinking about the next stage in your life. And that is a far richer, more interesting story than this is what I did from 1991 to 1993.
You need to take those barriers down to reveal the passions that are going to make you happy, ultimately, to help you find a fulfilling pathway in the next sort of 40, 50 years of your life, 60 for some people if they're lucky. And I do truly believe that we do create these veneers of ourselves. My veneer on LinkedIn is totally different. Like my passion on Twitter is in the environment, a bit of horse racing, which I used to train racehorses. So I'm really into air pollution, which is a bugbear for me at the moment. with the resumption after lockdown of Heathrow, which is up the road, and loads of cars on the road. So I have these sort of segments of passion that tend to sit on my different persona. Facebook's different again. It's all about saving the Rocky Mountains from coal miners from Australia. So there's lots of, I think we all do that to a certain extent, but I wonder, I mean, are you saying, Sarah, then maybe we should be more authentic in the chat, maybe LinkedIn, maybe that should reflect more?
I'm not necessarily saying that, but I think what I am saying is that one of the things Catherine and I have sort of had discussions between ourselves about and talked to our storytellers is that when you're trying to do the exercise that we're encouraging people to do, that kind of reflection, and when you tell, whether you sort of write your story out, say it to yourself or tell it to someone else, that is the time when you don't do the edited, curated, part, because you can't really reflect on your strengths, your passions, experiences if you're giving this edited version. So it's not that your LinkedIn profile has to tell all the gory details, but at some point you have to be able to say out loud the gory details, because that's who you are, that's made you who you are, and given you the strengths you have.
Yeah, Sarah, I would go even further than that. I think that kind of removing that veneer of what's expected of you is even more critical in how you bring value. So, for example, I'm a trustee on the Architectural Heritage Fund. It's a small UK charity, and we're helping business community action groups to save buildings in their high streets that they love. And so part of my passion, as you've heard, is the environment and nature. And I never said anything in those meetings, never said anything. And then I think it came up at one point and someone said, hey, what is this? And I suddenly said, guys, we need climate change on our risk register, because I'm now on the risk and audit committee. And no one had even had this on there. And suddenly we've gone from that to having a whole new policy. We've got a whole new work stream. So we've got a whole new set of guidelines and protocols for the grants and loans program around climate change and sustainability and risk preparedness. And I'd never have got there, because my assumption is actually these guys, they're not interested in that. But it's making those connections. I think Catherine's chatting with you that made me think, God, I'm a hidden kind of source of ideas in areas that are becoming topical, but I'm still resisting sharing them.
And I think what I would just add to that, Suzanne, is that, sort of some of the conversations that I'm having with people who are still inside large organizations, sort of who probably would label themselves as career confirmers as opposed to adjusters or changers, is that they're starting to actually explore this whole issue. And I know it's cropping up on some of the big professional service thought leadership pieces as well, but they're starting to ask questions around personalization. So right back to what we were just saying about, should LinkedIn be that, sort of very, standard professional resume type approach, or should we actually put on there the things that make us stand out, where an organization might choose to actually, or we might choose an organization who matched our values and where our values alignment was very strong, because all of the evidence is starting to show that that's where increased creativity and increased productivity and increased happiness actually occur. So if you've got somebody who's creative, productive and happy, what sort of an organization is that versus somebody who's dragging themselves to work on a 2-hour commute each way on, sort of every day of the working week? So I think that's going to be something really interesting to watch. But the thing that jumps out at me as much as anything from what you've just said is that just in a few touch points, you've mentioned, your passions about, architectural heritage, being a non-executive director, horse racing, air pollution, the environment, sort of the preservation of the Rocky Mountains and where you actually come from. And I know that's only a very small part of the list where you've actually invested yourself since you left the big faceless corporation. So you've established your company and you're doing work for a whole range of organizations from very tiny to very big. But there are all of these other things as well. So I'm just interested to know a little bit more about what else fits on that list and how you actually do it all, because sort of you're so busy.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, Catherine, I probably take on too much, and I think I suffered from that in the corporate world as well. I'm a very much a yes person. If someone says, "Hey, do you want to get involved in this? Or do you want to go out and do this?" Always say yes. I still live,
which is how we got you on the podcast.
Exactly. Just to do something, you say yes. And actually, I think that, you suffer from your strengths can be your weaknesses as well. But in a good way. I think you need to celebrate them. And I think I do take on too much. But, that point of exiting the corporate world was a great, it was a great realization of, oh my God, I've got all this space in front of me. What am I going to do with it? And for a lot of people, that's really quite depressing. And I think it's quite scary. But for me, I just already had a back burner of list of all these projects that I said, well, I'll do that when I've retired. I'll do that when I'll do that on a career break. I'll do that on a sabbatical. So yeah, researching the family tree, doing, one of the things I started writing a book about my father based on a framework around his automobiles, starting with the horse and cart, the chuck wagon, which is how they arrived in the prairies and staked their claim in the 1800s. So that's one of the projects on the boil. I started a family history, Instagram style family history thing, which starts with, of course, doing your family tree, including my husband's family tree, and then getting all the pictures and the objects and photographing them. That's in train. I did a couple of children's books as well. I mean, it's just crazy. If I saw something, I thought I want to write about that or I want to do that, I will do it. And it has slowed me down, I must admit. But thank goodness for COVID. So then I'm like, great, the clients are quiet for a couple of months. Bring these things off the back burner, get them going again. And so I've just loved that. It seems like the world has stood still for a while to allow me to catch up on these other projects, including the garden, of course. As you know, Catherine, I've told you about I love my garden. And a little spot at the top of the drive now that has some plants that I'm giving away. And a bit of pirate gardening. Whenever I see a spot in the neighborhood which needs a plant, I sometimes stick it in at night. I'll go up and stick it in.
Seriously? You're sneaking around your neighborhood wearing black clothes, surreptitiously planting plants in other people's gardens?
Ninja
planter.
It's in public spaces. Ninja community planting. So
Ninja planting. I tell you something. I think there's a Twitter feed there or an Instagram feed. Ninja planter. Yeah, I love it. So Suzanne, I have a question for you, because we hear a lot of very different stories, but with sort of some very similar themes. And I think a lot of these resonate with your story. We hear people who are sort of middle-age-ish, children, they either don't have children or children are sort of grown and mostly off the payroll, and who, for one reason or other, have given up corporate life and started to do things that they have far more passion around. And they feel this incredible sense of freedom. I mean, one of the things we hear over and over is, I have the freedom to choose the projects I want, the freedom to go to the meetings I want to go to. I don't have to punch a clock for anyone anymore. And that sounds like something that really resonates with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's lovely to manage your own time and to not have everybody else appearing in your diary. And then somebody calls and says, can you do this? And so, no, sorry, I've got another commitment at 2:00. And that could be going for a walk. That could be going to the pub. That could be going, playing bridge, because I've been dragged into this whole bridge thing. I won't go on. So, but yeah, I love it, because your diary can look like you want it to without you feeling guilty. Like, I love it. And then when you're working really hard, you work until like 7 or 8, 10 at night, whatever, for a client, but it doesn't matter. Or you work on a Saturday and you send it to them on Google, times to leave your desktop at 8 a.m. Love that.
So one thing, and I think we've also heard this repeated a lot, is people realize not everyone has the luxury of doing this. I mean, we have, most of the people that we've talked to have either had some kind of corporate payout that has given them a bit of a cushion, or they've got a significant other who has,
I have
a regular job.
Significant other.
Yeah. And one of the things that I sort of think about as I hear these stories, and I wonder whether you have any thoughts, is it's absolutely true. There are many millions of people in the world who don't have this luxury. If you don't have the luxury of just saying, well, I don't have to have a regular job anymore, how can some people still avail themselves of some of the freedom and, you know, the wonderfulness that's come out of your ability to do the things that more align to your passion and your values? I don't know. I don't know whether that's something you've thought about, but it's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, I think it's exactly as you said it, Sarah. I think there's a lot of people that, and I was just talking to my husband about this morning. It's a lot of people that end up working in the career that isn't quite what they're really passionate about. And I think if you find the role that you love and that you're passionate about, it's not work anyway. A lot of
Yeah.
people, whether they're, designer, or like, for example, my daughter's going through this at the moment. She was working, a 12-hour day in a healthcare agency, and it's not for her, but she's doing a startup. She's now working even harder. She's quit the day job, but she's doing something that she's passionate about, but she'll work all hours and she'll love it. And she doesn't feel like she's working now. So I think if you find that passion and you're lucky enough, I don't think I was quite lucky enough. I think there's other things that I really could have done with my passions that I didn't end up doing because I was in a rather, it was a corporate environment where you had some choices, but you couldn't just say, oh, I want to start up a new thing over here that you guys don't do.
Suzanne, something that really just struck me very significantly as we just started this last little section of our dialogue was when you were about to say, sort of, you've got a schedule or a calendar, or your diary looks like, and before you'd actually said, I think you said, sort of looks like whatever it looks like. I sort of edited it in my mind and I thought it looks like me. So my calendar doesn't look like a corporate, sort of
Yes.
everybody else's diary. It looks like me.
Oh, I love that. And I think my diary in the past, no, it wouldn't have looked anything like me.
So I have another question, because again, this is something that we've heard multiple times, is people say, I should have done it sooner.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've not looked back, and I think the key thing is that life is too short to commit to one conglomerate, or two for many people if they're lucky, 3 or 5. I think there's so many great, wonderful experiences out there, great people to work with, great projects, and I get a real buzz from the variation of the work. So just going back to the work agenda for a minute, I like to take on really challenging projects that are short-lived. So a 6-month project where and I've got a chat tomorrow with somebody about one of these, where it's full on for a short period of time. You bring value in that short period of time, but you don't hang around once it's partly in track to be implemented, and you move to the next challenge. And I think that's more interesting. Starting up your own entity, keeping your connections, finding new connections and new firms, competitors, or whoever they might be, and actually spreading your wings has just been so enriching for me and so fulfilling. And also, you just learn. You're constantly learning new ways, new things, new ways of doing things.
Yeah, and that really goes to your mindset, your learner mindset. So, Suzanne, I have a question for you. You said something at the beginning, which I'd love to come back to. You talked about how your strengths can also be your weaknesses, and maybe vice versa. And one of the chapters in our book is with actually my cousin, who talks about how she's always been sort of a bit of a magpie, attracted to bright, shiny things. And for a lot of her career, she felt like this was a weakness because as soon as something lost her interest, she moved on. And one of the realizations she sort of come to is that maybe that isn't a weakness. Maybe that means she's someone who's more innovative and interested in starting things, and that's not a bad thing. And when you look at your career, have you sort of had any aspects of that where maybe something has come to feel more like a strength than it used to be?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we should always look at something that we think is holding us back, and see if there's a way of turning it on its head and say, well, how is this thing that I do, this behavior that I exhibit, this desire that I have, how is this, instead of holding us back, how can we make it into an opportunity? And I think at every step, I'm always trying to do this with clients as well. It's like, okay, that's a risk, but what's the opportunity? Because there's always a bright side.
The mindset that you described there, sort of, Suzanne, it is so powerful. Is that, sort of, no matter how advantaged or disadvantaged we are, our mindset is the thing that actually sets us alight, sets us free, moves us forward, enables us, sort of gives us access to opportunities. And for some of us, it's easier than others. But, sort of some people who are massively advantaged don't actually have the advantage of the positive mindset that you described. So it's really, really thrilling for us to hear you describe that so well.
And just on that optimism, I think this crisis, COVID, has really revealed that the importance of positive attitudes, positive mental health. And I think more than ever before, we've realized that actually we really need to work on being grateful and finding moments which are joyful in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's just slowing down and reflecting because often we'll all of us have experienced getting out of bed on the wrong side and saying, oh my God, how can I live through this? This is terrible. I feel depressed and nothing's going my way and I haven't got a job and whatever. But I think then sitting back and reflecting again on the things that we have that we're so fortunate.
So maybe one final question I have for you, as someone who has, and thank you for this, taken the time to really work through our wheel and to use the workbook, and I know has been reflecting pretty deeply on your own life and career. Is there any one or two insights that really you've come out of this with that you can share in terms of maybe what's next for you?
This is the first year where I've not left this garden space for like a whole cycle. And I think what I've really taken on board is how sensitive the ecosystem is and the times of the day that deer come in and the mice. That sounds really silly now, but the birds are on. Like I've got a woodpecker like creating a new nest. That's on Instagram actually. I didn't talk about my Instagram channel, but anything visual. He's created a new home to show his girlfriend in one of the trees. That was February, and I know where every hole is for every animal. And I've got 2 sets of robins that need feeding, upper garden, lower garden. So yeah, it's just, I think now when I leave, I'm going to be much more aware of what's happening in my space when I'm not here, and also much more conscious of the ecosystem in new places and the stress that it's under.
But it sounds like you're sort of pursuing this passion. You said you have an Instagram channel. I know you do your gardening. Are there other ways that you think that passion might drive you into different directions?
I might try to champion it more. Somebody said, hey, we need some marketing help with the Woodland Trust or with Greenpeace. So I would be on it.
Yeah.
I would be on it.
Yeah, I guess that was really more what my question was is, you have these experiences, you have these passions. Do you see them coming together more in the future? And clearly you'd like them to and would be open to it.
Yeah, I would definitely be open to it. You know what? I just haven't had time to create the next thing.
It's all that ninja planting. All the ninja planting.
I'm so busy keeping things alive here that
being a ninja,
finding time for the next passion. And I'm already pretty super committed.
What I notice in the circular nature of the dialogue that we've just had is that Suzanne, you're super good at noticing stuff. You are increasingly good at actually seeing the connectivity between your strengths, passions, and experiences, which, is one of the things that we really try to pull out in the storytelling wheel of reflection, and also linking that obviously into the mindset. So you've described all of that really well, but and you've mentioned the Woodland Trust at least twice in our conversation. And we've talked about authenticity and describing ourselves as ourselves, not as a professional resume. And I wonder what would happen at the moment when those things come together, when you truly realize your strengths, the value of your experiences, the connectivity of your passions, your mindset really frames all of that. And you actually see what could actually happen when you present yourself accidentally or intentionally, in a truly authentic manner to one of these organisations. And I'm really intrigued to see what might happen at that
so
moment.
True. That is, yeah. So
Well, that sounds like a follow-up podcast. That sounds like coming back to Suzanne, coming back around. Suzanne, thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.